to the one who has created and knows each and every one of his creation from the top of their head to the bottom of their feet. Yes, and we just thank God for being who he is and for all that he has done for us. Amen. Amen. Tonight we are here to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia. And with that, before we get started and before we introduce our presentation, we're going to usher the Spirit of the Lord in with prayer. Amen. Can we do that? And we're going to have our Deacon Baker, to offer prayer with us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out, doing this in clement weather. You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Good. Because whether you could hear me or not, I know he could. Dear Father, we take this time to thank you. Thank you for the health and strength that we have experienced. Father, we thank you for allowing us to come together and discuss these problems that we all, in some form or another, have experienced. Father, we need to understand these crises, and we know that you, along with the members that are here, can provide this information for us. Father, we thank you for allowing us to travel doing this in clement weather, and hope that those that are on their way make it safely. These things we ask in thy Son's name. Amen.
Now we're going to ask the Assistant of Congregational Care, Carletta Johnson, to come and introduce our presenter.
Good evening. I have the privilege of introducing our speaker for this evening. Dr. Stanita Jackson has served as a college professor at Dallas College, Richland campus since 2015. She educates health profession majors on biological concepts related to public health aspects of genetic and chronic diseases. She serves as a member of the Institutional Review Board, undergraduate research faculty mentor, Women Health and Wellness Committee, former Biology Search and Interview Committee, and the former leader for the 2021 Health Professions Week Committee. She also serves as the Mental Health Committee Chair for her Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated chapter. She loves science and majored in biology at Delta State University, where she earned her Bachelor of Science degree in biology with a minor in chemistry in 2005, and went on to earn a Master of Science degree in natural sciences in 2007. In 2016, she earned a doctorate degree in public health with a specialization in epidemiology from Walden University. Her primary research interests are focused on early detection and diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease in African Americans, minority health disparities, and nutritional health and wellness for individuals. She currently serves on the board of directors and a community educator with the Dallas and Northeast chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and has volunteered in several roles with the organization since 2012. She is a Gates Millennium Scholar alumni, a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a member of the American Public Health Association, and a member of the Texas Association of Community Colleges. In her spare time, she enjoys spending time with family and friends, traveling, reading scientific articles, attending community events, and volunteering. Please help me welcome Dr. Stanita Jackson. You got it going on. Oh, you're mic'd up. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me this evening. Good evening. How are you doing? We're not going to let the rain spoil our educational program tonight, right? So as stated, I won't go into more background about myself, but I do serve as a college professor at Dallas College, Richland campus, and I have been volunteering with the Dallas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association since 2012. Just a little background information on why I'm passionate about this disease and helping my people is because my grandmother was diagnosed towards 2005 to 2006, and I actually had an opportunity to do an internship, and we had to do a research project, and so I chose to learn more about Alzheimer's disease. Unfortunately, after I started volunteering in 2012 with the Alzheimer's Association, the next year in 2013, my granny passed away. She was like my second mom. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. I'm originally from Mississippi, but I've been in Dallas for 16 years. So my granny was a woman who loved to help other people. She would give you her last plate, her last penny, dollar, whatever that she had. So it's actually therapeutic for me to come out and give these talks to educate people and bring that awareness on these early signs of dementia and Alzheimer's so we can make a difference in our own lives because I know my granny would want that. She was the type of person who was selfless, so she cared more about helping others. So that's why I'm here today. Are they gonna pull up the slide for them? Okay. Okay, it can go next. So today we're gonna talk about the understanding dementia and Alzheimer's. So it's a lot of information, and I'm okay if we want to take stopping points to stop and ask questions, or we can wait to the end to be able to ask those questions. We do have a quick video just to show you to look at the facts and figures. So these are the numbers that we see in the population right now and the projected numbers that unfortunately we will see in the future for this disease. As you've seen in the video, there are a lot of statistics with looking at Alzheimer's disease. It is definitely a public health crisis, and so that's why I'm so passionate about it as well, because that is what my doctorate is in, public health epidemiology, to try to look at the disease risk, incidence, and the prevalence, so how it's actually spreading in the population. As you've seen from the video, a third of seniors die from this disease. We have people that are younger than 65 that can develop Alzheimer's disease, as you've seen, even starting at the age of 45. Of course, other underlying risk factors and diseases can increase that person's risk for that, so we'll be taking a look at some of this a little more in detail. So as you've seen, 6 million people are living with Alzheimer's disease, right? And so looking at the population, those are people that are over 65 years of age, which is unfortunate. With this disease, age is a main risk factor, and that's one of those things that we can't prevent. So we have to look at other ways to try to implement those lifestyle changes to reduce our risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. As you can see on the screen, by 2050, it's projected that 12.7 million people, almost over double of what's now, will end up having this disease. Texas is the 4th largest state with the highest number of cases of Alzheimer's disease, all right, which is very unfortunate. About 1 in 9 people 65 years and older will end up developing Alzheimer's disease. So these statistics are alarming, but there are things that we can implement and make changes. I know we have traditions and things that we like to do, but we need to take priority in our health and start to make those changes so we can live healthier, longer lives. So as you can see on the screen, we want to talk about the difference quickly between dementia and Alzheimer's. So dementia is a term that you may hear often. This is an umbrella term, meaning that this includes any type of cognitive decline that can affect that person's life, right, from day-to-day living, doing different tasks. With Alzheimer's disease, you hear so much about this disease because it's the most common type of dementia. As you can see on the screen, there are other types of dementia. Typically in African American populations, we see a lot of vascular dementia, and that correlates to the heart and the brain. All right, 25% of blood that's pumping from the heart needs to make it to the brain. And so typically when people suffer from some type of heart disease, right, stroke, high blood pressure, those type of chronic diseases, it will possibly increase their chances for developing Alzheimer's disease. There's also frontotemporal, which basically affects the entire frontal lobe. And so that is the front part of the brain that helps with processing things, the logic, the reasoning, just a lot of day-to-day activities that we need to do come from the frontal lobe. Some people can have a mixed dementia, so sometimes it may be difficult for the physician to accurately diagnose that person, and typically they may give a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, which may not be necessarily true, just because medical doctors typically don't have a lot of time to see patients. They're gonna kind of go with the quickest thing, unfortunately, sometimes. Even with my grandmother, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, but looking back at her history of having heart disease and having high blood pressure, diabetes, all these other underlying conditions, she actually had a vascular dementia. And so I want you to realize that Alzheimer's disease, or even looking at a dementia, is not a normal part of aging, right? We're gonna age. We're gonna go through changes as different organs in our bodies age, but with Alzheimer's disease, we're gonna look at specific early signs and symptoms that that person may exhibit, which is not normal. So this is Dr. Alois Alzheimer's. He was a German physician. He was a psychiatrist and also a neurologist that over 100 years ago seen this disease in one of his female patients. He was able to look at the brain, and so the picture to your left, my right, you actually see the brain actually forms these tangles and plaques. It's called amyloid. Typically it's a beta amyloid, and that's just a fancy term for a protein. This is a long protein that grows in the brain. It starts to form these tangles and these plaques, and that starts to shut off those nerves from being able to transmit from the brain to go to different parts of the body so that we can function. So the brain has 100 billion nerve cells in it, right? That allows us to see, to walk, to talk, to text, to drive, to do the day-to-day activities that we need to do. And so when these tangles and plaques start to form on the brain, those processes start to decline, which is unfortunate. But he was the physician that came up with this and founded this disease over 100 years ago. So we just want to acknowledge him. So unfortunately, when a person has this disease, those nerve cells are going to continue to tangle, plaque up, and eventually die, so the brain is going to shrink, and so therefore all bodily function will start to shut down, right, in that person. You think of the brain as like being the CPU, right, of that computer. It controls everything. So without the control center, the body will shut down eventually, and it's very unfortunate when we start to see this happen. This is showing you a picture of a brain. So when you think of a picture of a healthy brain, that's more like a nice piece of cauliflower. Anybody like to eat cauliflower? No cauliflower eaters? I do. It's good. put the cousin to broccoli. So this is like a nice piece of cauliflower when we look at a normal brain. You can look on the picture beside it, that is a brain with Alzheimer's disease. It starts to shrink, shrivel. Why? Because those plaques and tangles have formed. There's an overproduction of that protein, which is that amyloid in the brain, which is gonna cause these tangles and plaques to form, all right? So that's not gonna allow those nerve cells to function like they should, which is unfortunately. So this is gonna shut down memory. Typically with Alzheimer's disease, we'll see short-term memory goes first. Why? Because the part of the brain, the hippocampus, is the kind of center little tiny part of the brain before you go to your brainstem that is in charge of new memories, right? So that person is gonna forget recently learned information. So short-term memory goes first, and then those plaques and tangles start to just spread throughout the brain and eventually just shrink the brain, as we see on the visual here, which is unfortunate. So we want to look at the 3 main stages or phases of Alzheimer's disease. We can further break this down into 7 stages, but this gives us kind of the overview. The early mild stage is most important, and what I've seen with African Americans that we really want to get the point across of educational awareness, because we're detected at later stages, and unfortunately by being detected and diagnosed at later stages, it's not much that the physicians can do for as the medications working properly to be able to help us. I did my dissertation research in 2016 on the same thing that we're still talking about in 2023, right? Which breaks my heart because the educational awareness is so important. So early stages, we start to see that that person can still maybe function independently. And when I look back at my granny, before she was diagnosed, she was probably exhibiting signs and symptoms 10 years before, but nobody noticed, nobody paid attention. And if we did, we just discredited it, right? Or she was able to mask it so well to say, oh, did I say that? Oh, my bad. Oh, you know, she had a way she always had a, excuse or a way to come back to reassure us that she was okay, when in fact she wasn't. And then it got to a point where she was walking to the store in her neighborhood and she couldn't make it back home. So that was like a total red flag or something going on. So early on, that person can still function, but they may have some challenges, say, coming up with the right word, right? Lately, I've been kind of doing it myself. When you're not getting enough sleep, right, things like that, stress levels are high, maybe not eating well, nutritious diet, those things can mimic, right, looking at types of memory loss. That person may have challenges performing tasks. So we all know our bodies, right, and we know when something's not right. So we want to take heed to that to say, okay, this is happening a little too often early on. Maybe I should go in for my annual checkup. With the annual checkups, they should, if you're at a certain age of 65 and older, they should be doing a simple mini mental test, just where you draw the clock, tell you some words at the beginning, come back, repeat those words for them, ask you some like current event questions, things of that nature to kind of test. And then if you're really experiencing more signs and symptoms, say you're not able to do your job like you should, and you're noticing that you're making a lot of mistakes at work, maybe you're forgetting to pay your bills, or maybe you overpaying a person for the bills because those problem-solving kind of concepts in the brain are starting to decline. Those are early signs, and we're going to look at tonight details of those early signs. There are 10 warning signs that we see either in ourselves or our loved ones that we want to take heed to get that person in to a physician so they can get diagnosed early on, okay? Because it's really going to help save our lives, right, and extend our lives. We're looking at middle to moderate, so that person may still be able to function a little bit, but we start to see more decline, so that person may have problems coming up with more words, phrases. They may actually start to isolate themselves, and that isolation comes with I know something's wrong with me, but I don't want you to know what's wrong with me, so I'm gonna stay away from people, especially in my social groups, clubs, say church. I'm probably not gonna come anymore, right? Because I don't want you to know that something's wrong. Also, they're gonna start to forget a lot of things, so you may tell them something and they're gonna ask, what did you just say? And you may do that like 5 or 6 times. Right? So that's telling that something's going on with the brain, as well as changes in sleep patterns. So typically, with a person, even from early going to moderate, you probably heard of sundowner. So as the sun goes down, that person may start to get really, really confused. Also with the seasons changes, so that person may be up all night because they think it's daytime and that they should be at work, when indeed it's nighttime and they should be asleep. Or like it's warm outside today and they're probably dressed for winter, which in Texas, it's kind of hard to do, right? Winter's coming Sunday, but typically when we start to see the person not dressing in seasons, right, they're not able to take care of their personal hygiene, things of that nature, that's going to moderate. In late stages, that person is going to be to a point where they may not even be able to verbalize anymore. Why? Because the brain is not making that connection to come up with those words, right? That person may end up needing 24-hour care at that point. And so we'll talk about what caregivers actually go through with that caregiver stress, because they just can't handle it anymore, right? And the resources that are available for them to be able to assist. So question here says, which of these is the greatest known risk for developing Alzheimer's disease? Age, right? Age is number 1. However, family history, right, and genetics plays a role. Why? They have found genes that are linked, right, to a person developing Alzheimer's disease, like an APO gene, which is a polylipoprotein, which is just a fancy term for a lipid, a fat, and a protein, right? So typically when we start to look back at our diet, a person that may have high cholesterol, have heart disease, have high blood pressure, those can be underlying factors that will put that person at more risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. We want to know our family history because typically research has found that if you have a parent or a sibling that has developed Alzheimer's disease, then your chances will increase more of possibly developing that disease. So I know it's something that we don't want to talk about, but it's something that we need to know our future, right? Because I'm the type of person, I'd rather be proactive and know kind of those risk factors than not know, and then it just kind of stumble up on me and it just kind of happens. So we want to be able to look at these. Remember, with a person being with age being the main risk factor, if they're over the age of 65, then that's going to increase their risk automatically. Because as we age, all of our organs age, and of course the brain starts to age at that point. So when we look at addition to looking at the risk factors for the general population, unfortunately, Hispanics and African Americans, so I say our brown people are at higher risk for developing this disease, but typically we're the last ones to get diagnosed, which is unfortunate. African Americans are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease, and women are almost 2.5, almost 3 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease, right? And with looking at Hispanics, it's about a 1.5% of them being able to develop that disease. There's no one reason why a person would develop Alzheimer's, but there are several different factors that we start to look at it. Diet, underlying chronic conditions, family history, right? The age of that person, kind of that lifestyle we want to take a dive into. Compared to whites, right? We see more prevalence in African Americans and Latino. And unfortunately, compared to whites and Caucasians, they are the ones that go to participate in the clinical trials. So when we see the drugs being advertised for Alzheimer's disease, it's typically targeting that population. Why? Because they have been the ones that have participated in the trial and the drugs have been found to be effective. And we'll look at a couple different drugs that are out on the market right now. I know there's a lot of stigmas in the African American community with participating in clinical trials, which goes back through history, right? Looking at Tuskegee and what happened. Also with Henrietta Lacks, if you ever heard of her, I teach about her in my biology class, right? But remember with that, you just want to look at that consent form, read it, understand it. If you don't, find someone that can help you explain that to see how it would benefit. I participate in clinical trials, right? So because I want to know and understand, and just know it is to help you. Nothing should be taken away from you to do harm to you. It is to help you. If African Americans don't participate in these clinical trials, then it's not gonna be a personalized medication or drug to help our DNA. We're different, right? We have all different DNA, and then we look at ethnicities and different cultures, we are all different as well. So I just wanna bring that to our attention. So these are the 10 warning signs, and before you leave tonight, we have handouts of this at the front table that you checked in, and so you can look at those 10 warning signs. So typically, that person is gonna have some type of memory loss that's gonna disrupt their life. We all forget, as I told you, I forget sometimes, right? We all forget, but typically we remember, right? This is a memory loss that's affecting your day-to-day life. You're forgetting to the point where things are just going in disarray, right? They're not going right. So compared to a normal aging process, we all forget. It may take us longer to remember, which is okay, but we all forget. I was volunteering one time at a phone bank with WFAA about Alzheimer's, and this lady called and she said, "I can't remember my favorite song. Do I have Alzheimer's?" I said, "Did you remember?" "Yeah, I remember later." I said, "No, ma'am, I think you're fine." Right? So we all go through the processes of forgetting, but we want to be able to hopefully remember. When it's disrupting our life, say, okay, I forgot my car note, then I forgot to go to work, I forgot to feed my child, I forgot to eat today. Like, that's a problem, right? That's disrupting your day-to-day life. When we look at the second one, challenges in planning or problem solving, some people will start to experiencing difficulties in that functionality of trying to plan, develop things. So typically people say you're still working, you're at a job, or you're over some type of program, and you're not being able to put the pieces together to get everything to come right? Say you have a big presentation at work and you get in front of everybody and nothing's there. It's like a blank slate, right? That's a problem-solving type of thing. So making errors also with your bills, right? Maybe the yard man came and I normally pay him $45, but today I gave him $145. Okay? That wasn't a tip. That was me not understanding, my brain not processing that I paid him too much money. And hopefully he's honest and he'll give me my money back, but maybe not. With the third early warning signs, that is difficulty completing familiar tasks. And so once again, we start to see a lot of problems with people with starting to drive. And so with that, that person may be able to get to their location, but then getting back is a problem. One of my participants, her mother was like that. Like, her mom was able to drive to the store and everything was normal. But getting back home, it was a challenge. And so we start to see these billboards and we see these silver alerts, and those are alerts that a person that has dementia or Alzheimer's is lost, right? They haven't came back home, and so now we need to put out an alert to try to get that person back safe, right? Because those are some problems. When we start to look at number four, I'm blanking out. I blocked that one out. Confusion with time and place, right? So with that person is gonna have trouble understanding time. So they're not gonna know time of day, time of night, and as I stated earlier, they start to experience the sundowner, so as the sun goes down, that's when a lot of confusion starts to setting in, and so that person may become very agitated, very aggressive, just because they don't know what's going on, and it's unfortunate. With number 5, that person is gonna have trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. And so with my granny, I look back and she used to love to watch TV, her soap operas, right? She used to love to watch TV, she read her Bible, everything, and she kind of stopped doing those things, right? Because the visual part of the brain cannot process that anymore. All right, so that person is not going to want to watch television or read or do any of those activities that they typically were able to do. That person is going to experience problems with words and speaking, so they're going to have troubles having conversations. And so once again, typically we see that person is going to start to isolate themselves. Why? Because I know I can't get the words out maybe in time in a conversation, so it's probably best that I just kind of stay away and nobody will bother me, right? And nobody will question me, right, on what's going on with me. And you may, at number 7, that person may start to misplace things and not be able to retrace them back. We all lose things. I'm guilty of it, but typically it'll take us some time. We'll go back and retrace it. With this, that person may start to have accusations that someone has taken their items just because they can't find it, which may not be true. But we see this a lot with those early signs of Alzheimer's disease. And that person, for number 8, is going to have a decreased or poor judgment. So that person, once again, their hygiene is probably going to decline. And I've seen this with my granny. She loved to cook, right? She was a Mississippi woman and she can cook. She loved to cook. She stopped it. She would ask me to come over to cook her food, right? She wasn't able to administer her medications anymore, and so she had to get assistance with that. She wasn't able to pay her bills, right? So a lot of these early signs kind of overlap one another when we start to talk about them. And then that person is going to withdraw themselves from work and social activities. So if you know this person is always active and always busy in the church and activities, and all of a sudden they disappear, like, please check on them, because something is going wrong, because that's not the norm, right? But that person knows that something's going on with them, and so they don't want others to know. So isolation is kind of like the Band-Aid at that point, where they are kind of just stay away. And lastly, that person will experience personality and mood changes. And so with that, when you're typically around a person that you've been knowing for a while, you kind of know their personality and how they function. But this person is going to drastically change. Why? They may not honestly remember you, or they may think you're someone else. We were thankful enough that my grandmother was able to remember all of her kids and grandkids. She didn't get to that point, but sometimes we see that. And with the personality changes, sometimes the person can mask that. So once again, they'll come up with an excuse on, this is why I acted this way, right? When the personality is very, very drastic. So that person may also become very depressed. And sometimes a state of depression, I think we all go through it at some point in time, but we snap out of it. But if we're talking chronic depression, where this is lasting for days and weeks, depression can mimic signs of dementia and going into Alzheimer's disease. So we want to get that person in for some medical evaluations. So as I kind of already talked about, it's very important to look at the early detection and diagnosis, especially in the African American population, because we are the ones that are suffering the most from this disease, and we are the ones that are diagnosed at later stages. And unfortunately, with a later stage diagnosis, it's not going to be a lot that can assist us, especially if we have ignored early signs for years and years, and then finally things have gotten out of hand, and then we seek help, and then we want a quick fix. But unfortunately, with Alzheimer's disease, it's not going to be a quick fix, just because the brain has those plaques and tangles, and it basically started to shrink at this point. So the early warning signs are super important to connecting to this early detection, so we can get that person in, actually get the mental test done, which is a quick assessment. I even seen studies, and I met someone at a research conference before over in South Korea, where they actually do it at the pharmacy, right? So it was a small neighborhood, and so when people go visit their pharmacist was kind of in this process on checking to make sure was that person okay, right? Because they see them quite often. And so we don't want to ignore those signs. We want to get in to just get our evaluation. We are very proactive sometimes with checking on our heart, right? Checking, our pancreas for diabetes, with cancer. As you've seen with the risk factors, Alzheimer's is worse than breast cancer, right? And looking at other types of cancers and chronic diseases, right? They get more funding than Alzheimer's do, unfortunately. But this is a disease that unfortunately is not going anywhere. So you want to be able to look at what benefits that you have with Medicare and Medicaid. Soon I'll talk about a clinical trial that we have information on in the back that my mom and I are champions for and working on with Dallas to get that person in to get that brain scan so we can take pictures of the brain to see if there's a buildup of amyloid. And they're paying for this, you guys. It's free. Medicare is paying for this, and they're also personalizing medications for that patient. So this is not a one-stop shop. This is something that they're doing long-term, right, to see if it is effective. So when we look at medical testings, as you see on the screen, those doctors are looking at images of the brain. We cannot, unfortunately, see inside of our bodies, so we have to go to medical physicians, right, or providers, so they can do tests, either blood tests, right, to see under a microscope, which is what I do day to day with my students, so we can look under the microscopes because we can't see what's going on in the body, right? We cannot see what's going on in the brain. We can say our brain is okay, we're good, oh, I'm just tired, or I'm just sleepy, or I didn't eat anything. But those are just kind of brushing off the big picture because we need to see if indeed the amyloid, which is that protein, has a buildup in the brain. So PET scans are very safe. All they're doing is taking a picture of your brain. Right? Some studies may ask for saliva sampling, and that saliva is just once again going to be taken to the lab to see if you have the buildup of their protein in your saliva, right? When we think about the brain, what happens in the brain doesn't stay in the brain, right? Because we're made up of all these cells, so the cells need to go to different parts of the body. And with that, we want to just make sure we get those pictures of the brain to see if we actually have that amyloid there. There are also types of MRI, CT scans, and cerebrospinal fluid scans to be done. They can also do blood tests now, which is very, very innovative and quick to be able to see if you indeed have that beta amyloid buildup through your blood. Right? So that's going to help out with the testing as well. And once again, you want to look and see if your insurance is paying for that, so you don't have to pay out of pocket. And also, that's when those clinical trials come in hand because they pay for everything. You don't pay for it, right? So you're not a guinea pig. You're trying to get help and resources, and they're covering it. Right? They don't want your insurance cards. They're going to cover everything because they want to see if this is actually working. And so with that, you just want to look at the benefits versus the risk. And typically, a good clinical trial will have very low risk, right? So there's not going to be any harm to you. There are also physical exams that can be done as well as neurological tests to be able to see if that person may indeed have Alzheimer's disease. So this gets me into the new ideas study. This study was done in 2013. It yielded a lot of participations. However, there was a big gap with this. Why? We did not have enough African Americans, Hispanic, Latinos participating. That's a problem, right? So they created a new idea study. This is sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And my mom and I are champions, and one other person is a champion in Dallas. It's 3 of us. And Dallas has over 7 million people. And we have the highest numbers of people that are participating in this trial right now. This trial is looking at new ideas. IDEA stands for Imaging Dementia Evidence of Amyloid Study. It's going to take you in to your physician. If the physician say this person even has early stage, which is a mild cognitive impairment, right? That's the earliest that a diagnosis can happen with a type of dementia. That physician will refer you to a neurologist. In this study, we have neurologists that are specialized throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're gonna schedule you for the PET scan just to take pictures of your brain. That's it, right? We need to get the images of the brain to see if we actually have a plaque buildup of that protein in the brain. And with that, that person will further go on to be a part of this clinical trial, and Medicare is paying for it. They pay for the PET scan, right, which can be a very expensive scan. They're also personalize it to follow that person for the rest of their life to be able to develop medications, right, to target Hispanic, Latino, and African Americans, right? Because a lot of the medications that I'll share with you shortly, they help only with some of the symptoms, so some of the behavior aspects, and then they may not necessarily work for the populations of looking at Hispanic Latinos. This study is nationwide, so we're everywhere, and if you indeed want to be a champion, we need more people with us, and you just go out, work with your own community, just give quick educational talks or hand out flyers, because this is more of an awareness type of study to get people in for their early detection, because unfortunately, we're perishing as African Americans because we're not getting in for early detection to get effective treatment, right, for us with this disease, which is unfortunate. So what should you do if you notice changes in someone? Okay? One, don't run away. Okay? Stick it out, right? We want to be able to figure out what's going on with that person. And so we're going to look at some steps that you should take in this process. You don't want to be aggressive in tone when you're approaching that person, because as we know, what we put out comes back sometimes. And so if we're putting out an aggressive tone or a demanding tone, then that person is not going to be receptive to what we're saying. So we want to make sure that we're having a nice, calm tone, we're in a nice, quiet environment, and that person is open to listening to what we have to say. So this is that 10-step approach that we're going to look at to assess the situation. I want you to understand, with any type of dementia like Alzheimer's disease, it's not the person. I promise you, the person is not trying to be mean or evil or hurt you or, do bad things. It is actually the disease. Their brain is not functioning like your brain, right? And at that point, their brain is not able to process everything. So, of course, we all get agitated. I do sometimes if I can't figure something out or get something out quick enough, or, if I make a mistake, right? That's kind of normal human behavior. But a person with Alzheimer's, the nerves are not connecting anymore at that point. So we have to try to assess the situation as a loved one or a friend, or even if you just see somebody wandering down the street. This happened, I think in Plano a couple weeks ago. One of my sorority sisters and her husband noticed that this man was wandering down the street and nobody stopped. I mean, cars just passed forever. And this person was lost and possibly had early type of dementia, and they actually stopped and helped that person, right? So we want to assess the situation safely, right? To be able to, sorry, it's a warning or something going on. To be able to get that person in a calm environment so that we can talk to them. So we're going to look at this approach. We're going to go through that to have a conversation. That conversation should be a very gentle conversation, just showing that I'm concerned, right? Grandma, I noticed that you're not cooking anymore and you love to cook. Or you went to the store the other day and you couldn't get back home. Is everything okay? Like those conversations, right? Where we as a loved one, we want to kind of document and write down, okay, they did this day. I'm starting to see a pattern, right? Where human behavior, we start to see patterns. And so just trying to find a way to talk to that person. We don't want to gang in on that person, right, and make them feel like they're in trouble or they did something wrong, right, or this is the kind of intervention thing going on, because they're most likely going to shut down and get angry. All right, so we want to be able to have that conversation, and then from there, try to do what we can to get that person in to evaluation with the medical provider, so we can tell them, and it's always good for somebody to go to the doctor with that person. So, because like with my granny, she was going to her doctor. She was saying, hey, I'm okay, nothing's wrong with me. And the doctor was like, okay, I got about 10, 15 minutes, you okay, good. I sent your medicines to the pharmacy, I'll see you next year. She was masking it, right? But if she had a person there, right? I was off at college, my mom was working, and our other kids were, working. So nobody was just there, because she was literally telling us that she was good and she was maintaining. But if somebody was there saying, okay, I noticed that my mom or grandma stopped cooking. She's not taking her medications right? She went to the store and she couldn't get back, right? And she became frightened and agitated. Then that will help with that process. So don't be afraid to help your loved one, right? They need that, because honestly, they might not tell the doctor that they're going through these changes, right? Which will continue to delay that process of getting that early diagnosis. So step one, what changes have you noticed in memory, right? What do you think is going on with that person? What are we seeing, right? What's causing this concern? We want to be able to notate that. I know since the whole pandemic and COVID, the whole planet has shifted, right? Nobody's life is like it was before, right? And that's okay. We did see an increase of cases with Alzheimer's disease, unfortunately, due to the social isolation, right? And people just staying away from others, and also just being afraid to go to the doctor. Remember, when you go to the doctor, you're paying that physician. So if they're not a good doctor, and unfortunately all doctors are not good doctors, right? Some people are just in it for the money. And if something is wrong with you, and they're not accurately diagnosing and treating you, please find another doctor. It's okay. It's your life, not theirs, right? And you're paying them. So take control of your health. For number two, what else is going on? Okay, we noticed the person forgot this. They forgot to pay their bills. They maybe, not dressing according to seasons. What else is going on? You want to kind of build it up, but you don't want that build up to just prolong, right, for a year or two, and that person is starting to slowly decline. We want to look at stress. As I told you, we're living in highly stressful times. I think everybody's stressed out at this point with the changes in life. Is that person depressed? Did something happen? Did they lose a loved one, right? Did they lose their job? Like, did some type of lifestyle change happen? Are they taking medications? Sometimes diabetes medications, also high blood pressure medications, the lack of vitamins such as vitamin D in the body, vitamin B12, those can mimic types of memory loss and dementia in people, right? Also having a poor diet, right? Is that person just eating fried, fatty foods and not eating green leafy vegetables that are more nutritional? We want to learn about those signs. So as you're here today, you're learning about those early signs, being able to recognize those, to see the benefits of that early diagnosis, right? And then from there, we want to know, okay, I'm noticing this, right? Maybe you're the closest person to your relative or friend, but you want to ask other people, are you noticing this also? Okay? And if they're noticing it, okay, it's not just you, right? Or you're not just picking on that person, but they're noticing these changes as well. So we want to be able to talk together with one another to try to come up with a plan on how we can address that person and start that conversation to hopefully get them to a point of getting to the doctor for that evaluation. So we look at step number 5, okay? Who should be the one to discuss the concerns with the person? It could be you, it could be a trusted family member or friend. Throughout research I've done, sometimes it's a stranger, okay? You wanna go with whoever that person feels comfortable with. Maybe they're not gonna listen to you, but maybe they'll listen to a stranger in the grocery store. Whatever works, like choose your battles, right? So if that's the case and they don't want to listen to you, but they may listen to someone else, go with it. We're just trying to get that person in so they can get that diagnosis and testing. You don't want to be aggressive with that person, make them feel threatened or like you're ambushing them, like we're all going to gang in, like I said earlier, and have this big intervention at Thanksgiving or Christmas. No. Maybe not the right time, right? We want to have a gentle conversation with this person and see what approach might work best. And that goes to that person's personality, like, right, what type of person is that? Some people are very quiet, private people, so they may not want everybody involved in that process. So just kind of assess those situations. For step 6, we want to know when and where should this conversation be held. So, like I said, Thanksgiving and Christmas may not be the best when all the family comes in from out of town and we're trying to celebrate the holidays to have this conversation, right? What time of day? For a person that's maybe experiencing early signs, you may not want to have this after the sun goes down, right? You may want to have this maybe after that person has waken up, maybe after lunchtime, just kind of assess the situation. If they're not a morning person, I wouldn't choose morning time to have a conversation like this with that person. So you want to be able to identify that in your planning. For step 7, what will you or the person having the conversation say? So write it down, right? I write down stuff all day, you guys. I teach over 100 students, and so I have to have my plan and be organized on how I'm going to class and what we're going to do and talk about so I don't forget. So it's okay to write stuff down, right? So we write it down so we can kind of have it prepared, kind of like a script, so we don't miss anything. We want to make sure that we go over everything with that person and just keep reiterating, if needed, that I care about you, I love you, I notice these changes in you, and so I'm here to help you. I don't want to hurt you, I just want to make sure that you're okay. Just remain with a gentle tone with that person. Step 8, as I stated already, go to the doctor with that person, right? Sometimes if that person goes to the doctor alone, they're going to be in and out. They're not going to go into details. The doctor say, hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, right? They have kind of memorized that point that they can say, yeah, I'm okay, and the doctor's going to let them go, right? It's not going to do any further evaluation. So it's always good to accompany that person. If you can't get that person to the doctor, because sometimes this happens early on, you want to maybe, I'm not saying tell a story, but say, hey, let's go to lunch today, and then after lunch, let's make our way to the doctor. I have to make this stop, and then we get that person there. Typically, that person will go along with it, but once again, we want to get them in. We don't want to keep pushing back and delaying just because they may not want to go to the doctor. If needed, we can have multiple conversations, right? So maybe the first conversation didn't go right? That person was very upset, very aggressive, agitated, and was like, leave me alone, don't talk to me, nothing's wrong with me, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people say that, I don't know why the correlation is there, but it's a big stigma with looking at Alzheimer's disease and dementia as being like a mental illness, and that person is crazy, and it has nothing to do with that. It is not a mental illness. That person is not crazy. It's a neurodegenerative disease where the nerve cells are dying, right, at this point. And so we don't want to, once again, be aggressive with that person, but have multiple conversations if needed so we can get that person to get to the doctor. And looking at step 10, right, we want to turn to the Alzheimer's Association with those resources. I have a lot of resources outside for you guys. They have a 24-hour helpline, the 1-800-272-3900. You don't have to memorize that or write it down. It's on all the brochures. That number you can call at any time of day and night. Say it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You having a situation with a loved one. You don't know what to do. Call that 800 number. Those are dementia specialists that will guide you. You just tell them what's going on and where you're located. They will guide you to the right person to help you, right? If you need to find a doctor, if you need respite care, right? Somebody to come in and help. If you need to find different facilities that are dementia type facilities in your area, like whatever it may be, at any time of day, they are there to help you. They can also get you to, as I stated, the specialized doctors, so the gerontologist, the neurologist, and the neuropsychologist. Next, we want to look at some FDA-approved treatments for symptoms. And before I go into looking at these treatments, so when we think about the FDA, right, that's the Federal Drug Administration, and so they approve certain drugs. Why? Because clinical trials have been performed with human participants, right, to see if these medications are working. So you've probably seen the commercials before, and so they tell you, yes, it helps to treat this disease, but then you have like all of these things at the bottom that it can possibly cause. They have to report that. If one person, say, died from the treatment, they have to report that, right? One person lost an arm or a leg, they have to report that. With that, there are unfortunately also some other medications that are advertised on the television, like Prevagen, which is not FDA approved. And so during some of my talks with my mom, we had people that told us, I'm taking Prevagen. And I was like, don't do that. Don't take it, please, don't take it. Hey, Prevagen, if you read, it's tiny at the bottom. It is not FDA approved, meaning there has not been any clinical trials done with human participants to see if the medication actually works, right, with helping the memory. So when we go take these over-the-counter supplements, they can sometimes cause the memory loss to increase, right? So a person on at that same presentation was honest and said, you know what, Dr. Jackson, I was taking Prevagen and it made my memory worse, so I stopped taking it. And so those drugs can have that effect. Even with supplements, right? I have to take supplements. I take vitamin D just because I don't get out in the sun a lot. I need vitamin D. Vitamin D helps keep us alive, right? Keep the immune system. But we don't want to go to the pharmacist and just start buying all these different supplements just because they have promising effects on our memory. They can actually increase their risk for developing dementia and Alzheimer's, right? We want to be able to look at Federal Drug Administration approved drugs that have been shown to work to help reduce those symptoms for Alzheimer's disease. There's an app, and you can easily Google this. It's called the Alzheimer's Research Hub, and they keep you up to date with everything. I read it quite often because they show you all the drugs, but we'll look at these different medications right now. So, quick pop question. Current drugs help us address symptoms but do not treat underlying cause of disease. True or false? Right on. True, right? These medications do not stop the damage, right, of looking at those nerve cells, right, but they can show some effectiveness with being able to reduce those symptoms, right? So if we're looking at behavior issues, maybe slowing the progression, there is a new medication that has been recently approved through the FDA that I'm going to talk about here shortly. But these are kind of like Band-Aids. There's no cure for this disease, right? We're still hopeful. We hope that one day we would get there, but unfortunately right now there's just no cure for Alzheimer's. So when we look at the drugs, you have three main classes or groups. The first one is cholinesterase inhibitor. And so you think of inhibit, like I tell my students, you think of stopping something, right? So this one is be able to reduce kind of that plaque buildup in the brain. We have a compound called acetylcholine that helps the neurons transmit, so from going to the brain to different parts of the body. And so this drug is going to work to kind of decrease that. The market name is Aricept, Exelon, and Razidine. So my granny was on Aricept. So from her diagnosis in late 2005 up until she passed away in 2013. And as I stated, compared to other people with the disease, hers didn't progress as intense or as fast. She was still able to, long-term memory was there, right? She had 9 siblings. She remembered all of them, her family, things she did when she was younger. She never forgot her grandkids and her kids. But unfortunately, every person is different. The second class of drug is looking at glutamate modulators. And so you probably heard of Dementia. And so it kind of acts the same way, right? That amyloid is building up on the brain. And so these drugs want to kind of try to slow that process down, right? And lastly is Namzaric. So this is a combination of the cholinesterase inhibitors and the glutamine modulators. So a combination of the drugs. We have another medication that is new. Has anybody ever heard of this before? Lecanemab. The brand name is Leqembi, right? This has just been recently approved. It has passed those 3 trial phases, going into the 4th phase. This drug basically is a IV injection that the person will have to get every 2 weeks. It has an antibody, and the main goal is going in to target the protein, the beta amyloid that's building up in the brain, to destroy those. But in order for it to be effective and work, that person has to be diagnosed early on. If that person is diagnosed at the early stages, say going into a moderate or severe, that person, it won't work, right? It has not been found to be effective. Now, with this drug, as we know, when new drugs come out, they're very expensive. And so I'll be honest with you guys. It's $26,500 a year for this drug, all right? But I've seen and I read that the Alzheimer's Association has programs that will support payment of this drug. Also, if you have Medicare, Medicaid, there's a 20% co-insurance payment that you will only have to pay for this drug. Now, this is a fairly new drug, but once again, I don't want to discourage you because this is a real promising drug, right? It's actually destroying the plaque and buildup and the tangles in the brain, right? If that person is diagnosed early on. But the costs right now are high. The Alzheimer's Association is working with policy changes and advocacy at DC, right, to get more funding, to be able to fund this drug, and hopefully Medicare would 100% approve this drug because it has shown to be very promising. But it is a IV fluid that will go into your veins. So typically you'll go to like your healthcare provider or like an IV center, and every 2 weeks they'll do the injections of Leqembi, Lecanemab, which is the medication, but the brand is Leqembi.
Excuse me.
Yes, sure.
If you were to do that, just if one did that, how long is that process? You go every 2 weeks for how long?
Right now, I think until for your life, until they tell you to stop, or through that lifetime. Because the whole goal, as you're getting those injections of the antibody, they're also going to be doing the brain scans intermittently to see how much of that protein buildup is dying, right? Is it killing off? So if it's killing off majority, but with that, we want to be careful that it doesn't come back. So that person may have to kind of continue that process, but they may reduce it. So it's kind of personalized to each person since our genetics are different. But right now, it's advertised as being every 2 weeks.
Okay, one. Okay. Okay. One other question I wanted to ask.
Yes, ma'am.
Since there are few African Americans that take these type tests or do the trials and stuff, would that also work in us, although we haven't been in the trial for very long?
What?
Or very few of us in the
That's
trial?
the thing, yeah. That's the kind of downfall, because if we're not participating, right, or if it's a low percentage of African Americans participating and say a high percentage of Caucasians, and it's showing effective in them. And I'll share with you guys, I have a board member who has had early stage mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's disease diagnosis, but she was proactive in her health, where if you were to meet her, you wouldn't even know she had the disease. But unfortunately, if we don't participate and we don't have the results, those numbers to say this works in African American, Hispanic, Latino population, we don't know. It's the unfortunate thing that we don't know, right, until we actually go through it, right, and get that information. So when we're taking these medications, like I said with my grandma, Aricept worked, but when we look at these drugs, mostly Caucasians, whites are participating in the clinical trials. right? So it's just kind of like a chance that we're taking.
You mentioned for this particular drug, early detection. What kind of time frame are you referring
So
to?
that's when the earliest that can be detected is what's called MCI, mild cognitive impairment. So that's when typically that person is over 65 and older, and then they're starting to notice those early signs of memory loss, problem solving, the poor judgment, all those early signs. And so when that person gets in, they get that diagnosis, and so if the doctor diagnosed them at an early stage, then they will qualify to be able to take this drug. If it goes past early stage, because these stages, these three broad stages can go into several smaller stages, and so if that person is like borderline late early stage going into moderate, they may not qualify because too much of the buildup of the protein has happened in the brain.
So no time frame associated with just the symptoms?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're all different. So as they say, it's rare cases. I mean, I've even heard of cases like people in their 30s that develop Alzheimer's disease. So it's super rare, but it happens, like people in their 40s as well. But typically we start to see that early mild cognitive impairment after the age of 65. So when we look at the impact of Alzheimer's disease, I want you to think about how many Americans provide unpaid care for a loved one or a person that's living with Alzheimer's disease or dementia. You want to take a stab at it? Unpaid caregivers. So these people are taking care of family members or loved ones, but they're not getting compensated for it at all. Huh? Maybe you missed my key. Okay. So we look at over 10 million. 10 million, we start to see women living with this disease, and when we start to see caregivers, it's over 8 million. Unfortunately, we see a lot of caregivers are women, and with that, it's a lot of caregiver burden, and then with that, the caregivers start to their health start to decline, and then they end up being more susceptible to getting diseases like Alzheimer's disease. So when we look at this disease, it's kind of a double attack on African Americans, and especially if you're an African American woman, right? You're going to be more likely to develop this disease, and also looking at this caregiver burden and stress. As you see, over 60% of Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers are women, and about 2/3 of all of those Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease are women. So it's kind of a double whammy for women that we look at with this disease. So as caregivers and as women, I know we love our families. We want to put everybody first but ourselves. But we have to stop to make sure that we also take care of ourselves. It's kind of like being on the airplane, right? When you're on the airplane, the stewardess is going to go through everything and say, okay, if this plane were to crash and we had to get off, whose oxygen are you going to put on first? Even traveling with my son, I have to put on mine first, right? Because I have to be able to breathe to be able to help that other person. So the same way with being a caregiver, we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. When we look at Hispanic, Black, and Asian, so these are just minority groups that we started to look at as dementia caregivers. There's a greater demand, right? There's a lot of caregiver stress and burden, and majority of these people are unpaid. And if they're paid, like by Medicare or Medicaid, it's such a tiny amount of money that it really doesn't help out with anything, right? Because the medical expenses are very high. Also looking at the care for that loved one, if you want to keep them in home, is very expensive. And then the medications, right, on trying to kind of reduce those symptoms that we start to see in those people. So in comparison to white Americans, minorities just unfortunately kind of have more of a demand for caregivers, which means we see more cases of Alzheimer's disease in these minority groups in compared to whites and Caucasians. So with this, it comes to caregiver stress. We already talked about stress and how it can affect the body. Unfortunately, caregivers have caregiver stress, and this is whether you are a primary caregiver, right, or a secondary or tertiary caregiver, right? If this is a person that you love and care about and they're suffering from this disease and you're trying to help them, it can create stress. For me, even though I wasn't directly there with my grandmother, it was very stressful, right? On seeing the person that I love that helped raise me, not being able to do the things that she was able to do before, and kind of seeing her health decline. And then, unfortunately, we had to put her into a nursing home facility and then leaving when she wanted me to stay with her, and I couldn't. It just broke my heart every time. And so with this, we want to look out for some signs of caregiver stress. The first one is denial. And I think we all go through that sometimes, especially when we hear a diagnosis like Alzheimer's disease or even see the early signs in our loved ones. We want to deny it. Sometimes we think that if we deny it, it will go away. It's not true, right? So we want to not deny it. We want to be able to address that, to try to get that person help, and that will also help us as well. There's a lot of anger and irritability that falls with this category. And that person, once again, is going to withdraw themselves from their friends and social activities. Anxiety, so that fear is going to come in, right? And with that, it can lead to depression. Right? And I'm talking about the caregiver. This is not the person with the disease. This is the caregiver. So if the caregiver is going through all of this, unfortunately, that's going to put some health decline on that caregiver where their health is not going to be up to par to even take care of their loved ones. That person is going to be not being able to sleep. They're going to be exhausted all the time, which is going to, of course, affect their mood. They're not going to be able to concentrate, right? So they may end up making mistakes. And eventually, it will take a toll, not just on mental health, but physical health, right? Remember, the brain controls the entire body, so when our mental health is not good, that affects our physical health, right? So as caregivers, we have to be able to take care of ourselves. And so over 60% of caregivers are married or living with a partner or a long-term relationship. But with that, as we talked about, most of those caregivers are women, right? And typically, even with my own research, I see most of the caregivers being women. And that puts a lot of burden and stress on that caregiver, which is just trying to take care of an aging parent or a spouse or another loved one, right? Because that person took care of us, so we want to try to repay that back to them. So as I stated, you want to get support. So the Alzheimer's Association has that 1-800 number that is 24/7. So I don't care what time it is, you need help, you're panicking, you don't know who to call, please call the Alzheimer's Association and they will get you to the right place. You want to take care of yourself. As I just stated, I cannot express that enough. Sometimes, when we're trying to take care of others, we lose kind of that concept of taking care of ourselves, and then our health starts to decline, and then it kind of starts to show in our day-to-day life. So exercising, I know the weather's not really formidable right now, but just going for a 30-minute walk, right? Just exercising, or if you like to go to the gym, doing that, keeping that socialization open like you all are doing tonight, right? With that community is going to be important as well. Keeping stress levels down. Unfortunately, with the brain, you have this hormone, which is considered a bad hormone, but it's kind of good in a sense. It's called cortisol. It's a fight or flight hormone. So if we were to get chased by a bear, typically we'll run, right? If we're in a bad situation. But if that hormone starts to release too much, it creates inflammation in the body, and that starts to affect our memory. So we want to keep stress levels low as possible. Some things I do, I take my phone or I turn on my TV and I go to YouTube and I put in like a different kind of soothing meditations, or I love this in the church. I listen to the Psalms, and then they put me to sleep at night. So something just to kind of depress and kind of relax the brain. I know my brain is super overactive all day, and so I need a way to wind down just to kind of relax and not have anything on the brain, because that stress can cause problems in the body. And take a break. Like, I know we want to do everything, but we all need help. We really need each other, and we cannot do it alone. So being able to go through the Alzheimer's Association to find that respite care, they offer it. It's a free program. It's free. All right, so say you don't have family nearby, or you can't find a family or friend to help you with your loved one, but you need to go to the grocery store, or just need to go get your hair done, or to the barbershop, whatever you need to do, they will come in and sit with your loved one, right, for free to help you with that. So just know you're not alone, and there are resources out there for you. And once again, you keep seeing it pop up, right? That's a sign, right, of looking at the 24/7 helpline. So it's on all the brochures. There are dementia specialists waiting for you at any time of day. There's never a silly question in my book. The only one is the one that you don't ask, right? So if you have questions, you have concerns, please call them. They are there waiting for you, right, to be able to assist you and help you. We also have the website, alz.org, right, and all the information is there. They have tons of resources. They also have trainings that you can go through. So say you want to learn more about early signs or understanding dementia behaviors, right, and how to respond. They have a lot of different programs on there for you. Alzheimer's Navigator, where you can actually create this plan on how you're going to navigate to help your loved one, right, through this processes. With some of the caregivers I met before, they knew something was wrong with their loved ones, but they just kind of brushed it off and attributed it to other things because that person was able to mask it. And then honestly, they didn't know about the resources that were available that were free to them. So that process kind of got delayed, and it created more caregiver stress for them, where they had to quit their jobs, move back closer to home, and just kind of put their life on hold, which was unfortunate. Supports for caregivers are available. So they have support groups, right, where you can actually go and talk to people that are going through similar things. And for some reason, that's healing, right? When we know we are not the only ones going through it, we're not alone, right? And there's people that can share with us what they've gone through to help us kind of in that long run as we're going through that process. So you do have a lot of help and assistance for you. This is a little boy, and at each Alzheimer's walk across the nation, we always have one child to carry the white flower. The white flower is a hope for the cure of Alzheimer's disease. Unfortunately, we don't have a cure now, but we hope one day we will have a cure and we will have that first survivor, right? Unfortunately, a person, once they're diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, will end up dying from that disease. And on the death certificate, that is what they put. They put that that person died from Alzheimer's disease, no matter what other ailments or diseases that they had, right? And so with that, we hope for our first survivor. And with that, that early detection is super important. So I want you to take advantage of, I know I said a lot tonight, but take advantage of the resources that are available to you, and don't be afraid, right? And please don't be in denial, because that prevention, right? That prevention is very important, and we know when something's not right with our body, so we want to make sure that we get in to get to the experts, which are the physicians, to be able to get us the help that we need. And so with that, is anybody coming to the Dallas Walk? It's next Saturday. So we hope that you can join us. I have a walk team. There'll be a lot of different teams. It's next Saturday at City Hall, downtown Dallas. Kickoff is, I think they start around 7:30, but kickoff is around 8:30. It's a really, really fun event. It's for all ages. All families, and this is one of our largest fundraisers to be able to raise funds for programs that we can offer that are free to the public, also for research, right, to be able to sponsor clinical trials like new ideas, and also looking at medications like lecanemab. So if you are free next Saturday, please feel free to come to the Alzheimer's Walk. It's really a great event. We'll be there with a lot of different resources. A lot of different vendors are there. So if you want to see a lot of resources that are available to you, you'll get a lot there, right? And it's just really, really fun. Hopefully the weather, last year we were freezing cold, but we were there. This event takes place whether it's rain, sleet, or snow, and we just never know here in Texas, right? But we would love to see you there, and so just go to the website. You can register, but you don't. You can register once you get there, so it's not like you have to do a pre-registration or anything, but that just shows your support for Alzheimer's disease, and so we're here to help you. Thank you, and I'll take questions. Thank you. I know it's a lot. Felt like a lecture. I lecture in 1 hour and 20 minutes, and I lectured the other day, my students was like, we have to get through so much information, so don't let it overwhelm you. Just take in bits and pieces, grab the resources at the table in the back so you can go back at your own leisure and look through it again. But I take any questions if you all have them.
On this, where you have the amyloid protein buildup,
Yes, sir.
is there certain foods that will increase that?
Yes, sir. So going back to nutrition, we do have a program. If you guys want me to come back, I'm all for it. That goes a little more in depth to looking at healthy living for the brain and body. So we look at that beta amyloid, that protein buildup. Sometimes it's what's called, I mentioned earlier, a lipoprotein. So it's like a lipid, which is a fat, right? And a protein, which is a large complex change that starts to build up all these tangles. So typically what we see in our African American community, if we consume diets full of high saturated fats, which kind of are the bad fats, but they're good ones. So like fried foods all the time, right? The swine, the pork, right? I'm trying to kick the bacon myself, but I don't do it that often. But the pork is no good for us, I'll be honest with you, right? The best diet that has been found, and if you look it up, you'll see it's called the Mediterranean diet. When we look at the people in the Mediterranean, this diet consists of 3 to 5 days of mostly fish or lean meats, green leafy vegetables, right? Legumes, beans. The only thing it lacks is dairy. That you can even implement a glass of red wine, which is good for the bloodstream. But perfect diet. And when we look at people in the Mediterranean, they do not have a lot of cases of Alzheimer's or different diseases like heart disease, stroke, diabetes, right, and all these other lining factors that we start to see in African Americans and Hispanic Latinos. So yes, diet plays a role. And so what I tell people, even with my students, anything with moderation. I'm not saying that I don't eat fried foods, and I told you I'm trying to get the bacon out of the diet. It's hard. I don't like turkey bacon. But with that, anything with moderation. So if I'm gonna eat like some fried fish, I make sure I have a salad on the side or something. Okay? And then that's not something that I'm gonna eat every day. I teach biology, and they're now doing research to look at things at a biological level, which is a tiny cell, and then going in the cell and has all these little tiny organs inside, right? And so that's how Alzheimer's starts to form, right? From one little cell, it starts to form these plaques and tangles, and it starts to spread and spread and spread and shrinks the brain, right? So we do want to make those dietary changes. And if we look at, if you even go to the American Heart Association, they tell you how to reduce your risk: diet and exercise, right? Physical activity, exercise. For top 10 chronic diseases we see in the United States, those are the two things, even with cancer, right? Change your diet, exercise, right? Make sure we're not putting any type of toxins in our body, right? Because that can increase those risks. Like with my granny, as I stated, she had high blood pressure, heart failure, diabetes. But one thing I will say about her, my granny cooked vegetables and beans and good lean meats every day. She ate that daily. So that could have possibly prolonged her life, even though she had all those underlying factors.
Okay, one other question.
Sure.
Now, we know pork is bad, but is it bad, or is it bad if you do fried? Is it worse if you do fried? Or is it just bad in general?
Let's go back to fried. So we have saturated fats and then unsaturated fats. Our saturated fats are typically like our solids at room temperature, right? Like some people use, I know where I'm from, they use lard, like this is so bad, right? To fry with coconut oil is a saturated fat, right? It's solid at room temperature and it has a high heat resistance. So some people fry with coconut oil, but studies kind of show some mixed results on that. Like we don't want too much of that. Like a good saturated fat would be like an avocado, right? Because that gets healthy fats in the body. Our unsaturated fats are the liquids, things like olive oil, avocado oil, which are good that we should implement in the diet. And so with Mediterranean diet, that's what they eat. They eat olive oil, right? A lot, right? Avocado oil, those things like that. So with the pork, it's bad. If we look at the pigs, right, the Bible tells us don't eat the swine. But when we look at the pigs, they don't have a way to sweat. They don't have sweat glands and they eat anything. And so imagine eating them and then things are clogging up. And what's bad for the heart? So we start to develop atherosclerosis, heart disease, that affects the brain. So it's kind of that connection. Spicy? It depends on spicy because with some spicy, it kind of helps. Like I can't do spicy, but for some people, spicy helps like like with sinuses and kind of all those things. I haven't seen any research that has connected like spicy foods to a buildup of amyloid in the brain. But yeah, it's just making sure we need the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats, but we need the good ones. We need them all in our diet. So a lot of people do these different diet fads on they're just trying to like carb load or load up on proteins, and they're lacking other of those macromolecules, and so then we start to see other diseases arise. But your body will typically give you warning signs, right? So if we know we have other underlying factors, then that could possibly increase our risk for developing different types of dementia.
With the program New Idea, is it mostly related to Medicare, Medicaid people, or just?
Medicare is the main sponsor for that. They're the one that's going to pay for the PET scan and also look at that person's medical history until the end, because they're trying to work on not just seeing if that person has the amyloid buildup, but they want to personalize medications to that person so it can help them and see if it's beneficial. They did this in 2013, and so I'm going into my second year of this. So we started 2 years ago with this new ideas, and so if it's finding to be beneficial to get in and get that early detection, then medications like Leqembi will be paid for by Medicare, right? But they want the evidence, they want the numbers, right, to see how it is having a positive impact on the minority population.
And then also, is Aricept still a good medication out
Yeah,
there?
it is still on the market, and as stated before, it works for some people, right? And some people it doesn't. It's just kind of like different blood pressure medications, right? It's so many on the market that if that person is noticing that maybe they're taking the Aricept and it's getting worse, then they maybe need to go back and revisit the doctor to see what other options that they may have. Because I know like with high blood pressure, all medications don't work for one person, right? So we just kind of have to reevaluate and not keep taking the medication if we're starting to see it, increase the decline, especially with the symptoms, because that's the only thing that the medications are targeting. They're not killing off the plaque or the protein buildup in the brain like we've seen with lecanemab.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My husband is in a nursing facility,
Yes, ma'am.
and what is the difference between the Alzheimer's and the dementia? Because, I don't know, sometimes he's in a good mood and sometimes look like he hate everybody and
Yes,
get
ma'am.
mad. So what's the difference in that?
Yes, ma'am. So dementia is kind of that umbrella term. So that says that that person has some type of cognitive decline, right? That's affecting their day-to-day lives. Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia, right? So it's saying like, I love to eat food. What type of food do I like to eat, right? I like seafood, right? So look, Alzheimer's we hear a lot about because the majority of the population has Alzheimer's. We got 6 million people that suffer from Alzheimer's disease. Now there's vascular dementia, there's Lewy bodies, there's frontotemporal, there's also Huntington's disease, but those are very low cases that we start to see. So with that, with the disease, and as I tell you, I know it's difficult, so you know, that person being up one day like their normal selves and then all of a sudden may be more agitated and aggressive. It's the disease, it's the brain. Those brain cells are basically continuing to form those plaques and tangles. And so that part of the brain is not functioning like it used to function. It's like a person having a disability, right? We have to meet them where they are because it's not them trying to be mean to you. It's just the disease that's taking over the brain.
Well, I noticed that when you don't go all the time, it's better for them and for you.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
that is something that I had to get used to, so it's much better and I can handle it much better.
Yes, ma'am.
The less you go, as long as you know they are okay,
Yes, ma'am.
the less you go, the better off you are.
Yes, ma'am. And sometimes that does happen. So maybe even if you go and peek, right, but not let that person see you, because I know that was really hard for us with my grandmother because she didn't want us to leave, and she wanted me to, to stay with her, and I would always stay the night with her when I was younger. But at that point, I couldn't stay in the facility with her, so it was just really heartbreaking. So you have my deepest empathy and prayers.
Hello, I don't have a question, but I have a comment. One of the things that you mentioned was, I just forgot myself.
Take your time, take your time.
One of the things I thought that you mentioned is having someone to go to the doctor with you. I remember my mother-in-law, she was about, when this first started around, about 85 maybe, and she would go to the doctor and she would tell us everything is going okay. And it's like, no, it's not going okay. There's something going on. So my husband decided, I'm going to go with her this time. So the doctor said, how are you doing? She said, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. He said, are you exercising 3 times a day? Yes, sir, I sure am. Are you eating green leafy? Oh, yes, I cook those kind of things all the time. And so my husband said, he just looked and said, and so the doctor said, okay, well, looks like everything is okay. And my husband said, do you honestly think she's exercising 3 times a day? Do you really think she's eating just green leafy vegetables?
Yes, ma'am.
There's a lot of things, and he said, and of course they kind of wanted to ban him and said you couldn't come back, and he said, no, I'm coming back because if you're going by what she's saying, there's no reason. I understand why she's not getting any better. You can't depend on her history.
Exactly.
And I remember us going to Six Flags. We took her, we had just fed her hamburger, fries, a drink. 10 minutes later, she said, I am so hungry. Why won't y'all feed me?
So
And that
see-
was when I first started really noticing she just ate less than 10 minutes ago. So I just wanted to say that to encourage those that are caregivers, because it's very, very hard on the caregivers, just as hard as it is as that person. Because you see this person that loves you, but they don't remember anything. Or the things they remember are things before you were born. And they make it sound really clear, and they're talking to these people, but these people are clearly dead. I mean, deceased. So I just wanted to just say, please go with your loved one. My mother is here. She doesn't have any of those problems. We do have a history of it. But when she doesn't feel comfortable out there, going to talk over her head or whatever, I don't have a problem with going with her because I know sometimes they can just kind of disregard what they're saying, and you need somebody else to say, no, wait a minute. Listen to what she said. She said she's not doing this or she feels like that. And even me, I don't mind if somebody would like to go with me. Of course, I usually take myself, but just to have that other reassurance that you heard everything they said, they give you the after visit and said, okay, have a good day, you understand? And most of the times people say yes. as the nurse, I get after the doctor leaves, what did he really mean? What was this for? And I'm thinking, he was just here.
Yes.
But I've learned to be patient because they don't always feel comfortable talking and saying what's really going on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
That's
you
all.
so much for sharing. Yes. And that's the thing she brought up. I know sometimes, yes, we have respect for our physicians and our doctors, but we need to get to a point where we're not fearful of them because it is our body, it is our health, and we need to take control of that. So we want to be able to talk. I talk to my doctors like we friends. I go tell them what's going on with me, and they're there to help. So because that's gonna help you by not telling information. That's gonna hurt you in the long run. So just want to be open and, like she said, have someone to go with you that you trust, right? That to support you is really important. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, the lady, I don't know your name, but I love the statement that you made, and because it's really good to be able to talk to somebody that gets you. It really, because people will, and even in this setting, I used to be one of those people that if I ask a question, these people are gonna think it's me. Well, it may be me, and it may not be me. But a lot of times, I feel like it's important to ask questions because you may be able to help somebody else that won't say anything.
Exactly.
You know, they may not ever tell you help them, but I know that it works.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I have one question about your testing. You mentioned the beta amyloids.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it a regular blood test, like a standard amylase evaluation, or is it a separate test from
Yes,
the
ma'am.
routine
So
amylase?
they have a couple different ways to test. So as I stated, like with the clinical trial New Ideas, they can actually do, it's a kind of mandatory saliva test to see if the buildup is in the saliva, and then it's an optional blood test. The blood test is gonna give us a little more supportive evidence because they're able to take that, look at that under the scopes, and then of course that PET scan to be able to get those pictures of the brain to actually see if we see those plaques build up and those tangles on the brain. So it's a couple different options, and it's just kind of what that person feels comfortable at, and you know what is being covered by their insurance. But there are a lot of resources, so I don't discourage people not to, you know, go for the max and get all the tests because that PET scan is really going to show those pictures of the brain to see what's going on. It's like if I had a heart problem, right? They need to take heart tissues, get some pictures of the brain, of the heart to see like what's going on with my heart. So we want to do the same with the brain.
One of the things, okay, as I'm going back here, I want to thank you for clearing up that Alzheimer's and dementia is not a mental illness.
Yes, ma'am.
Some people think that it's a mental illness, so therefore they want to hide what's going on. And then what's going on with that person, they might know that there's a change. However, they don't want everybody else to know
Yes.
that there's a change going on because, of course, we used to be the epitome of memory, but now I'm having issues. And so when we see that, you know, I just like you said, let's be loving and kind and not harsh because the independence is going to go next.
Yes.
And people know that. And when the independence go, then everything else as far as that, you know, goes. So, and just to say that the stress level can cause the dementia or the Alzheimer's. I'd like for you to talk a little bit more, and I'm going to give you the mic, but I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about the vascular, you know, because the vascular is one of those things that people don't realize is under the umbrella, that dementia being the big umbrella. People hear Alzheimer's and they want to put everything in that category, but there's various, you know, ones, and vascular is one of them.
Yes, ma'am.
My husband has PTSD
Yes.
and dementia. Our doctor, primary care doctor, recommended that he see a neurologist. The neurologist did the blood test, an MRI, and you said the PET scan?
Yes, ma'am.
Is
The
that
PET
the
scan.
same thing?
The PET scan is gonna, basically that person lies down and their head, a part of the brain goes into this machine that's kind of oval shape, and it takes the pictures of the brain.
So is it different
It's
from
different
the MRI?
from the MRI.
Okay, so
yes, ma'am.
he did not have the PET scan. And then they recommended, well, he sent him to, they did the EEG.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then they said that they recommend that he get a spinal tap and then a shunt. And that's the part that scared me. So
Yes, ma'am.
what would you do? I went back to my primary care doctor, and he said that he did not feel a spinal tap nor the shunt to help a person, how it would benefit a person with a loss of memory.
Yes, ma'am. That sounds a bit extreme. My advice would be to, as you did, you went back to your primary care physician, but also getting a second opinion from another neurologist. And if you need help finding that, you can call that 800 number with the Alzheimer's Association, and they can help you find another neurologist. I would say that is a bit extreme. I have not heard that a person to get further diagnosis or treatment for Alzheimer's have to go through those extreme tests, which can be very dangerous, yes.
Okay. I also went a little further. He is a vet, so we went to the VA, tried to get a neurologist. He did an MRI. The reason the neurosurgeon wanted to do the scan and the tap is because they say they saw water on the brain. To me, I could not understand water on the brain. The VA said that they did not see water on the brain. They saw brain shrinkage. And they recommended another MRI in about 6 months. So would I be wrong to request, and I don't know who to request it from, the PET scan?
No, ma'am, you won't. I'm glad you're getting multiple opinions because honestly, sometimes, even though these are experts in the field, they're humans and they do misdiagnoses. Last year when the Alzheimer's Association Facts and Figures came, unfortunately, it was brought to awareness that a lot of minorities, African Americans, Latinos, felt discriminated when they went into healthcare providers to actually get help and treatment for Alzheimer's disease. The physicians disregarded them. They possibly misdiagnosed them and just kind of left them hanging. So this is something that happens. For some reason, even when we look at other diseases, physicians disregard our pain, our ailments, or anything that we're going through because we're African American or Hispanic Latino. So I would say keep fighting for your husband until you get the right physician. And thinking about it, you said a neurosurgeon, so we have to be cautious of sometimes people in their certain area of expertise like surgery, they get paid to do surgery. So yes, ma'am, yes. Yes, he gets paid to do, he or she gets paid to do surgery. So that's gonna be their recommendation, right? So we just, when we know something doesn't feel right, it's not sitting right with the spirit, we need to go on to further try to find the best physician for us. It's a lot of them here in Dallas. And so please reach out to that phone number and they will find you a list of neurologists that you can go to be able to get in and get your husband that PET scan.
This may be helpful to you. When my wife was diagnosed, she was sent out to Medical City. And they said, Medical City. And they did a MRI and came back with primary progressive aphasia. Then the neurologist said, I think it's a little bit something that's sent us to Baylor. So they said there was a problem with the speech. So she was for the speech. Then the neurologist came back and said, I think you need to go to UT Southwestern, where they have the state-of-the-art equipment. So we went out to UT Southwestern, and they come back with, they did a PET scan, and come back with frontotemporal, and that's how she's being treated now.
Yes, sir.
So that PET scan is in depth. You know, they go in, they look at that, and they can tell you exactly what's happening with the brain. So you may want to consider doing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, UT Southwestern, I've done some programs and talks with them. I actually had a neurologist that was helping me out with my research, but she moved away, but in a geriatrician. They, transitioned to other locations, but they are a research hospital. And when I'm saying that, they're actually conducting clinical trials, research studies to see what's most effective. And as he stated, they have the best technology for a very accurate and precise diagnosis. And then they're also an institution of higher learning, right? So they have the medical part, and then they have the teaching and the research part, which kind of makes them state of the art. So they are leading a lot of Alzheimer's disease clinical trials and research here in Dallas and throughout the nation. So thank you for sharing.
I just wanted to make a statement. When you go to the doctor and they come in talking medical, you can stop them right then and tell them, you need to speak to me in layman's terms. And if they don't, that means that they're not a good doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. I agree. Thank you so much. Yes, if a doctor is talking over your head, right, that's for medical lingo or people in their expertise, right? But you can request that you talk layman terms, so that I can understand. And like she stated, if you can, then I don't think that's the best doctor for me, because honestly, a good physician or researcher doesn't mind breaking down terminology to you, all right? So you can have a complete understanding of what's going on.
Amen.
And then the vascular dementia. So with that is a type of dementia that we see. We don't hear a lot about it, but it does affect African Americans and Hispanics, Latinos a lot, mostly African Americans, due to that vascular part. So that's with the heart, right? And so as I told you earlier, 25% of that oxygen from the heart, from every beat, goes to the brain. So if a person ends up having some type of heart disease, right, or stroke, high blood pressure, then that's going to affect the brain. Studies over and over have shown that correlation between heart disease, heart failure, stroke, high blood pressure for the risk factor of increasing that person for developing heart disease. And unfortunately, typically we see in the African American community that we suffer from heart disease, right? Heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, and so unfortunately that puts us at a higher risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease, right? Just because the heart and the brain are right there together and they're working with each other, and so the blood is not being able to pump to the brain, and so those plaques and tangles are just building up in the brain.
Let's give Dr. Stanita Jackson a hand clap.
Oh, thank y'all. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Was it helpful to you tonight? Let's give her another hand of applause. We just want to thank her for all her knowledge, for coming to want to share with us. We need to bring more and more people out, because dementia and Alzheimer is, as you saw the slides, it is predominant in our communities of color. And so this place should have been full, but I know the act of God with rain out there, really contributed to not having as many. But whoever is here, pass the word. Pass the word. It's something that happens. And just like your granny, my grandmother, it was like 9 years, but we saw just little snippets of progression, that something was happening, and people thought that it was something that was normal, that you forget, and the repeating and staying stuck in one area of life that was very familiar to them. and talk about the stories over and over again. Those are signs, you know. So we just want to thank you. And I see another question back here.
I just have one question about the clinical trial. If you want to participate, is that through the Alzheimer?
Yeah, so you can go to alz.org, and at a tab at the top, it'll have research and it goes to clinical trials, or you can just Google clinical trials, right, in Dallas. There is a website that houses all of them. Even through UT Southwestern, they have like all the clinical trials. So like everybody's working together to make sure. They actually have another website, Blacks in Clinical Trials. That's a big one in Dallas, where we once again trying to put all these clinical trials in different locations, so no matter where you go, you can get access to them.
Do you have to be a certain age?
Yes, well, they're doing so many different clinical trials. Like they're honestly doing trials for people 18 and up to look at the brain from 18 all the way aging. So there are different categories and criteria where I think everyone can fit into a clinical trial. So if you wanted that early detection, right, if we know we had a family history, like you can get enrolled in a clinical trial to see how your brain is operating throughout the years of life.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank, as you did just before, thanking you so much for coming, but
Oh,
I
you're
want to also
welcome.
thank you all
Yes,
for
thank-
presenting them
yes.
and allowing them to come. Thank you so very much.
And that's what our pastor, Pastor Oscar D. Epps Sr., he knows that things are going on in our community, and that's what he is about. He's about helping our community. So let's give our pastor, Oscar D. Epps, a hand for allowing us to have this. So without further ado, we would like to close out in a word of prayer, and just thank you
Oh,
for everything.
Thank you all
Yeah.
for being interactive and sharing and asking questions. I love it. That's how we learn, right?
Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you right now. We thank you for knowing that such a time as this was coming, Lord. We thank you for those that you are bringing our way to help us to understand the things that are going on in our lives. Lord God, we know that you are able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we can ask or think. So, Lord God, we know that you order our steps, and thank you for presenting people to us that we might be better in what it is that you would have for us to do, helping us to be good stewards over this body, this life that you have given to us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Hi.
If you have more questions, she's available.
You work for Dallas College?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
I'm well.